Hello, you beautiful people. It is your friendly, not so in the neighborhood, Peruvian expat. Expat in Peru, I guess, yeah. So, today I wanted to talk about the rising cost of flights, why, how you can get around it, and is it still worth it to come even to Peru, even with all this stuff going on? So, the first thing that I want to point out is these prices that I'm going to be talking about in this video are from the New York area. So, if whatever price that I say for the flight, the range, just add on whatever the average cost of flying to New York would be, and that's generally what you're going to be looking at to get here. Unless you live close to a different airport, like I think the Los Angeles airport also flies, or the Miami airport flies to Peru. So just wanted to put those disclaimers out there. So first, why do the flight prices even matter? For those of you that don't keep in touch with the prices of flights, and most people don't need to, so it doesn't matter. It's good that you're educating yourself now. Maybe you're thinking about traveling, but for most people, you don't really need to know unless you're planning on traveling. Then you look, and you might not know what they used to be, so you don't really know what you're looking at. So I've been following the prices of flights to Peru for the better part of 5 or 6 years now, maybe even longer. And they have changed drastically. And just to give you an idea, the first time I ever flew to Peru was pre-COVID. I believe it was 2017, might have been 2018, and it cost me to get to Peru $50 each way. Now, there's a few things that happen that makes that price a little bit unfair. First of all, I didn't care when I got here, and I didn't care when I left. There was just a period of time that I wanted to be here, so I had a very flexible schedule on when I was coming in, when I was going. So that was first. Second of all, I often will choose to go with the cheapest airline that I can find, the most budget airline that I can find, and just deal with their terms of service. For example, some only let you have a carry-on that's a certain dimension. I look it up beforehand, and the only thing I bring on the trip is the dimension of that. So my carry-on fits the dimensions perfectly, so I never pay for carry-on, and I never check a bag. So that's a lot of the reason why I got it down that low. But you were looking about $75 to $100 each way. That was a pretty average / good price. As COVID went on, I was able to get 2 people here for $100 each way. So still that $50 a person per direction price point, plus $25 because the person that I brought decided to bring a carry-on. Now, during COVID, there was a lot of, obviously, not very many people flying, so the flight companies were just trying to get anyone on the flight that they possibly could. So that fast forwards us to today. So there's 2 options that I have picked from New York. The first one is very specific, rigid days. Let's say you're a teacher and you only have time after the summer schooling session ends and before school starts. You got like a 2-week period. I picked an arbitrary period around what that time would have been. And I also picked flexible throughout the entirety of the month of September, just to give you an idea. So it costed $500 to get each way to get to Peru and back from airport in New York. That flight was from JFK. The teacher one, which is a very strict, rigid, middle 2 weeks of September, that's all I got, was $689 each way, and that was out of LaGuardia. That was the cheapest option that I found. Now, of course, these prices are going to change, so if you go look right now, they're probably going to be different. So first, I'm going to start off with why. Why are these prices getting so expensive? So first and foremost, during COVID, a lot of airline pilots, they stopped working, they retired. A lot of people changed profession because they didn't want to deal with the guidelines. There was a lot of people who didn't want to get vaccinated so they could continue to keep their jobs, so they left these jobs. So that basically left the airline companies in a kind of a deficit of pilots for the flights that they actually wanted to send out, which meant they had to raise the price in order to compensate. Basically, there was more demand for pilots, not only within companies, but in the general populace, so the prices went up. Second of all, basically all throughout COVID, all of the airline companies, the big ones, they just kind of hunkered down and they tried to get through it by waiting. They had some flights, but for the most part, they just kind of hunkered down. I'm sure they got some grants and stuff, but essentially, a lot of them had to take out a lot of debt. I looked into this, and a lot of them have taken on a lot of debt. And basically, if anything was to happen like that again in the next few years, and they were to maintain the same level of cost before, it would create the potential for them to go bankrupt. A lot of them would go bankrupt. Some of them would be very close to it, which is not good either. The last one is obviously fuel prices for jet fuel fluctuates. But so the next thing I want to move into is how can you save money on these flights? Well, I kind of foreshadowed it before, but the more flexible that you can be on your flights, the better chance you are going to get to having your flight prices come down. If money really is an issue, I'm not saying you can't travel, because I've traveled when money was an issue as well. But if money is an issue, you can't be strict on when you're traveling. It's just those two don't really go hand in hand. You might be able to make it work if you book it far enough out in advance, but usually I've found booking flights out in advance are more expensive than booking them out like 2 or 3 months before. Don't quote me on this, but from my experience, I've always seemed to check prices, paid less when I've waited instead of booking it a year out. The flight companies want to try to tell you otherwise just because it gives them comfort knowing that their flights are booked out. They want to book out their flights as far in advance as they possibly can, but as they get closer, they panic, and then as they get closer still, like the last few days before you fly out, two effects happen. Either the price shoots down because there's not enough people on the plane, or they skyrocket it for anyone who is in an emergency situation or in I just have to get out of here and go somewhere this weekend. They shoot the prices up to catch those people for those last minute buyers. So your real like Goldilocks zone is going to be like 2 to 6 months before you're planning to go, usually closer to the 2 months. That is what I've found. Typically what I do quickly is I set a budget that I'm willing to spend on the flights, and if the flights don't come down and I don't have a need to go there, then I don't go there. So should you still come to Peru with these flight prices? That's really up to you. I think over COVID, the tourism here dropped off and it's slowly growing back up. There's beautiful things to do. And the things that happen with the airline companies didn't so much happen with Peru. So I've noticed that things are about the same expense. Some things are a little bit more expensive. Some things are a little bit less expensive. But from pre-COVID levels, they're about the same expense. They've been struggling with an inflation issue because of their current president. However, for the most part, things have maintained fairly well in translation to the American dollar or European dollar, euro. So if you're thinking about coming here, as far as getting here and what you're actually going to spend on a week trip, if you're rather conservative, you could probably do it for under $700. If you wanted to do everything under the sun, that really depends on what you want to do. For example, I run retreats here, and the retreats are typically more expensive than the person that just wants to come and backpack and eat around and like kind of mosey around, maybe go hike a few things. But it's usually less expensive for people who want to come and have a touristic experience where they, go do very specific things like horseback riding in the Andes Mountains or drinking ayahuasca in a safe, controlled setting. That stuff, it's usually cheaper. It seems like a larger figure, like the cost of the retreat at the end of July this year is $3,500. And some people will look at that and be like, I don't know, that seems high. But if you really come and you do all the stuff you want to do and you break it down piece by piece and then add it all back together, it ends up being more expensive. By virtue of having people come on these retreats, I'm able to drop the price because I'm able to buy bulk things at once. Solo travelers or even duo travelers or sometimes even families aren't able to get that price just because they know you're here for a few days. They have more room to haggle on the price. I come in, I ask them what their price is, and they ask me when I'm trying to go, and I tell them I'm doing it for a retreat. So I'm just kind of surveying the area for prices, and they usually give me pretty good prices and then room to negotiate. So basically what I'm trying to get at is, if you're thinking about coming, I think in 2018, that was a great time to come and just throw all caution to the wind and do whatever you wanted to do in Peru and not really worry about it, because the cost per day was so low. $50 if you stay for 10 days, that's $5 a day for your flight, but you're doing a round trip, so $10 a day for your flight. It's not bad. It's okay to spend $10 a day and just completely lose the day. Nowadays, being $500 each way, 10-day trip, that's $100 a day. That's 10x what you were paying before. At that point, I think that most people at the lower middle class aim to make about $100 or more dollars a day, depending on their region. So losing $100 a day to doing nothing, it doesn't really make sense. So for those of you that are wanting to travel to Peru, at this current flight climate, I would recommend either finding a retreat to go to that's already got everything built out for you, or I'm usually not the big planner when it comes to traveling, because I typically aim for places that are cheap. Here in Peru, things aren't cheap. I mean, things are cheap, but the flights are no longer cheap. So now, to me, you can save yourself $100 a day, or $100 by filling your days up with things you want to do instead of getting here, getting your feet on the ground, and figuring it out. For those of you that like to travel that way, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying, for those people who don't travel often or travel, twice a year and want to get the most out of their experience, because of the flight prices, I think you should really take the time to dive into what you want to do and line that up, or go to a retreat that's going to do that for you, that you like the things that they have lined up, because it's really going to make the experience so much better. And lastly, do I think the flight prices are going to come down? No, I don't think they're going to come down. I hope they do, and I really hope that I'm wrong. But I don't think flight prices are going to come down for a few different reasons. The first one being, pilots are maintaining to be in demand, and the demand is only growing, and as that happens, the price is going to keep growing. Second of all, flight companies know that the only way to go to these other countries right now is to take a flight with them. So I'm not saying they have a monopoly, but flight companies, if they work together, they can kind of monopolize travel and force you to pay their prices if they want to go. And I think they're figuring that out by 10xing their prices in 4 years and seeing that people are still buying it. Probably not as much, but personally, if I owned an airline company, I would much rather fly 10 people than 100 people and make the same amount of money. Not only are you spending less in gas because of the weight distribution on the plane, but also it's just less mess to deal with. So if you do fill up the plane and you get 10x the amount of money, great. You're killing it. But if you don't and you only get 10 people, you're still making your money, and people are going to fly anyway. The only way I could really see the prices coming back down is if there was some sort of financial crisis to the point where people stopped flying altogether, which, for those of you that are in budget situations where you don't necessarily know if you have the money to travel because the flight prices are so high right now, start looking at day trips in your local area. I know it sounds kind of boring. If I'm going to go on a trip, I don't want to be able to drive there, or maybe you really like that sort of thing, but you will save a significant amount of money while you save up over the course of a couple years to come to a place like Peru. I think everyone should come and visit, and if you can, go on a retreat here at some time or some point in time just to see the beauty that is Peru. But I'm not unaware of what's going on with many people's financial situations, and if that's the case for you, take the time in your own country, wherever you are, to go see things that you haven't seen before and save yourself some money, because meeting in the middle, I think the worst thing you can do for travel is travel for the sake of traveling. And what I mean by that is, let's say you work and you make enough to travel once per year, but not to like anywhere crazy like Thailand. From the US, it's rather expensive, like $2,000 round trip. You can do like a middle of the pack, like we'll just say a Cancun visit. Cancun's great, but is it where you want to go? No. If it's not like, oh my God, Cancun is like my top goal, this is where I want to go, Every year that you continue going back to Cancun, that's a year that you're not going to be able to go to Japan or Peru or wherever else it is that you want to go. So I think that day tripping and saving up over time to make sure you can do the things that you want to do is important. Save up over time to make sure you can go on retreats is important, because one day you're going to turn around 60 years old. Maybe you've been to Cancun 20 times, but you never got to see the Amazon jungle. And that was always something on your list. So, quick recap. I don't think the flights are coming down. If you have a budget situation, try to jump or try to give yourself room and be open to when you can fly. And if you are just traveling for traveling's sake, I recommend not doing that, going to nearby places and just enjoying a week at a time in your area and saving a bunch of money so you can eventually travel to somewhere you really want to go that's on your bucket list. Because the worst thing that can happen is you can get to the end of your funds when you retire and you never got to make it to your bucket list location. It's just I can't imagine. For those travelers out there, it's worth it. Just be patient and we'll do it. Maybe something great will happen and the prices will come down. But anyway, if you want to see more advice on traveling, or if you would like to stay in contact to see other things about my updates of what it's like living in Peru, you can click this button right here where we can stay in contact. Otherwise, YouTube believes this video right here is perfect for you. They've been with you for a long time with all the videos you've watched. They've really gotten down to a science. So check that out because YouTube knows you so well. Otherwise, I will see you soon.